concept of area is a lot like what we were just looking at. And kids will approach area different ways depending on what level they're at. Some of them will count all of the squares. And then some of them will skip count. Like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They'll count by sixes, or they'll count by fours going across to see how many there are. And then they'll multiply the number in each row by the number of rows. So they'll know that 4 times 6 is 24, depending on what level they're at. Obviously, we want to get them to this level down here that they're multiplying. They know that they can multiply the number of rows by the number of columns. But some of them will need to count. It's from U cubed, how close to 100. And what you do is you take a dice, you take 2 dice rather, and you roll the dice and you multiply those numbers. And you, that becomes, then you draw an array to represent that fact. So 1 times 3, you can see they have flipped that into 3 groups of 1. So they have done, right, can you all see what? So they've done, that's the one that represents here. So what you do is then you take turns, rolling the dice and covering the amount of area that you can to build that array. And of course, you can see at the bottom down there that they can record what they've done. And what I would do, if I would have 2 playing, I would modify this a little bit. Each one would get a different color, and they would color in their area. And then like player 1 could write their problems on one side, and player 2 could write theirs on the other side. And then when it's filled up and you can't get any more in there, then the winner could be the one who has covered the most area. So therefore, they're going to have to understand that they're going to have to count all the areas that they colored in their color. So I would put a twist or a tweak on that just a little bit if I were playing that in the classroom for the kids. Of course, if they want to do it by themselves, that also could be an activity they can just do on their own. They can roll, draw their array, and write the equation, what it would be there. With you, this is using those Cuisenaire rods, and you do have those Cuisenaire. You have a set of those. And what they're doing is they're using, I'm just going to flip through these slides real quick so you can see them. And if we need, and then of course you'll have it to go back and look at again if you need to, once we have it recorded. But these are Cuisenaire rods. This represents the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And you've got a guide there that tells you what they represent. And you can, what they're doing is they're using these to model a 4 by 5. 5 by 1, that's a 5 by 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the yellow stands for 5. It's actually a 5 by 5. So they've just made a mistake and put 1 too many rods down there, is what they've done. So so pretend that one's gone at the bottom. And we're doing a 4, because this is 4. There's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this measures 5 all the way across. If we were to lay the single units down, it would take 5 of them to build one of those. Okay, so that's just how they're using those to model a 10 by 10. This is the 10, and there's 10 of them. And then they use the grid paper for the kids to model that. And then, of course, they show how the 10 by 10 can be exchanged for a flat using those base 10 flats. And then here's a 12 by 13. This is what I really wanted to get into because it really helps get into that algebra portion. Later on, they get to understand that concept a little more. So they build a 10, and then they put a 3 on a 2 rather out here. So they've 12 by 3 by 13. But you get the idea of how they've done that. They've modeled it with the Cuisenaire rods, and you'll have to work with those, and the kids will have to get familiar with them, and they'll probably need that guide to know how many each number is until they get used to it. Then also you possibly could put the numbers on a set or 2 if you had more than one set, and have them use those and then wean them away from them if you needed that as well.